podcast. I'm Louie, and as always, I'm joined by my bud Dave.
Hey.
And Dave, it's September currently. And for people like us that celebrate Halloween, it's already that time of the year in our heads. Do you agree with me?
Yeah, pretty much. You know, maybe 9 years ago, 10 years ago, I would say it would be the second week of September. But it's definitely the beginning of September now that starts the Halloween season.
Yeah, especially if you're a fan of the holiday, like a super fan of the holiday. Some stores already have decorations out and candy and costumes. I think we were just talking off air. You said you went to Target, but you didn't see much out yet, right?
Yeah, they have fall stuff out. They have the fall themed they have the Milano pumpkin spice cookies, which are actually amazing. So anyone listening should pick those up. They had the pumpkin cereals and whatnot, and they have the Halloween aisles set up, at least the candy ones, but they still have the back to school stuff set up. I was looking for the Hocus Pocus cookies, but to my avail, they are not out yet.
Yeah, dude, those Hocus Pocus cookies and the Mountain Dew Voodoo are really hard to come by. Maybe that's just here in New York because I see everyone else is getting their hands on them.
Yeah, I don't know.
But for some reason, you and I have no luck finding them this early. But it is basically that time of the year, and I thought on the show today we'd talk a little Treehouse of Horrors. So, Dave, where do you stand when it comes to The Simpsons?
Well, as a kid, I definitely was very much into them, the show. I remember, the arcade game, and correct me if I'm wrong. In the arcade game, Bart was on a skateboard the entire time, right?
Yes.
And was the main villain of the game the aliens? I can't remember.
I thought it was Mr. Burns. I don't think it was Mr. Burns, actually. Someone kidnaps Maggie, and you have to save her. That's the premise of the arcade game, if I remember correctly. It might be Mr. Burns. It might not. I haven't played that game. I think the last time I played that,
good.
It's amazing. They have to re-release that on some system, or console or something. Yeah, it's weird. So the last time I played it was actually in Salem, maybe 4 years ago, and I played it for 20 or 30 minutes. And it's such a great... I always love playing with Marge. She had the vacuum. Do you remember?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that? I think it was Marge had a vacuum, and Homer didn't have a weapon. I think he just used his fist. And Bart had the skateboard, and I think Lisa had a jump rope, if I remember correctly.
I don't remember what she had.
Yeah, but that game was awesome, and honestly, they need to stop playing games and release that to everyone so they can play it. But for me, I always loved the show. I'll admit, I always gravitated and favored the first 10 or so seasons, maybe 12, and it's a show I'll put on when I'm editing or cleaning my house, you know what I mean? Or, it's something I can always throw on.
It's good background.
Exactly.
It's good background noise.
And I have so many favorite episodes that, it's one of those, comfort shows, I could say. You could just kind of throw it on and pay attention to it or not pay attention to it.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
You don't have to necessarily... It's not something you have to sit and just dedicate hours to, you know what I mean? And really pay attention to the plot and all that stuff.
Like I was saying, as a kid, I definitely loved it. I feel once you get older, you probably understand more of the things that are going on in the episodes. But I felt as I got older, I kind of just didn't really care to check out the show anymore. But it certainly has its place in pop culture. So The Simpsons is 100% important in all aspects of I would say, again, pop culture. So
yeah, I totally agree. And most people our age, I think, when they think of the show, they think of again the earlier seasons. I don't think it's crazy to think that it's still on, dude. Isn't that crazy? It's 30 years.
Is it still on?
It's still on. They still produce new episodes. Yeah, dude. It's
that's good.
It's crazy to think that it's one of the longest running shows of all time. It's just insane. But people still watch it. It's still really important to people. There's something I want to ask you. So when you were a kid, did you ever own the Burger King Simpsons dolls? I feel everyone,
of course,
around our age had them. And I remember my mother I think she went back to school at one point, and I think there was like a Burger King by her college, and every time she'd come home after her classes, she'd bring me like one of the dolls, and I believe I had all of them. I still have the Homer somewhere. It's like in the storage, but those dolls to me represent my childhood, and anytime I watch the show, I automatically think of that memory.
I think the Maggie doll was the hardest one to get because I remember, like, I think it was Homer and Bart were super, like, common. Like, those were really easy to find. Like, you always got them. But, like, every now and then, like, a Maggie would show up or a Lisa would show up, and you're like, oh, shit. So, like, I think some of them were a little more, were a little more exclusive than the others. But, yeah, I definitely had those toys.
Yeah, they pop up on eBay sometimes.
So I think my favorite aspect of The Simpsons is the bootleg route of The Simpsons, where they would just take Bart and make him like whatever character is popular or something silly. Like I've seen Bart as Freddy Krueger. Like I've seen Bart like in like a cemetery. I've seen all kinds of really dumb plays on The Simpsons, and I fucking love it. And I think it's hysterical, and I almost like it more than the actual show.
Yeah, I remember back in the day seeing a lot of like bootleg T-shirts with like Bart Simpson on his skateboard, like "Have a cow, man" or whatever, like all his like sayings basically on it. And you could always tell it was a bootleg because their clothing was always the wrong color. Like Bart was wearing like a red shirt and like green pants, like it was like, always fake, but you could tell it was him.
Or he had like a white shirt and red shorts on, and it was just it was the complete opposite of what it should have been, and it was amazing.
Yeah, and it's funny because I feel like all that stuff is popular now, and I bet if you go on eBay,
100%.
If you go on eBay and you look up like bootleg Simpsons gear, Simpsons T-shirt, you'll see it, and it'll be like $100, like an authentic shirt,
And there's brands that are like purposely doing that, like taking Simpsons imagery and putting it with their imagery, and some of it's done it like insanely well.
No, for sure. I think I own one or two shirts that are like Simpsons. I don't think they're officially licensed, but they're Simpsons T-shirts that are kind of parodying something or some silly type of thing. I'm sure you have one or two as well. So.
I think so. Simpsons adjacent.
So one of the most important things when it comes to The Simpsons are the Treehouse of Horror episodes. To me at least. I think you'd agree with me, right, Dave?
Absolutely.
So the Treehouse of Horror episodes are basically The Simpsons annual Halloween special. Each episode is formatted in the anthology style, like The Twilight Zone, Tales from the Crypt, Tales from the Dark Side. You can see that was an influence on these specific episodes. And another fun thing about these episodes are they're not canon. So, like, they tend to kill characters off and do all kinds of insane shit. So I thought it would be fun for us to kind of revisit the first two Treehouse of Horror episodes. Now, Dave, when was the last time you actually watched one of these episodes?
Oh, I probably when I was a kid. I definitely watched these when I was a kid. But I couldn't, like, when you told me we were going to, when we discussed we were going to cover these, I couldn't even tell you what was what in any of these. So watching these was completely new to me.
Yeah, I watch them a lot. I tend to I used to have a DVD, I remember, that had all of these episodes specifically on them. And I watched it like every October, every September. They are some of my favorite episodes, and that's just probably because they're all Halloween and like horror related, and it's the Simpsons spin on that genre.
Yeah.
And I can't think of another show. We've covered other Halloween specials. I can't think of another show that is so, like that. Their Halloween shows are like these events. Like I remember Fox always like airing commercials for him. It was always a build-up, and I don't think it was like that for the original, like the first one, which we're about to get into. But it's just it became this big thing, and like even to this day, people like cover like, oh, I wonder what they're gonna parody this year. I think recently they did like Stranger Things and things like that. So it's just kind of crazy how over the years they've been able to kind of keep it fresh and innovative. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And one really funny thing is, and I don't know if you noticed this, in the episode, I don't know, I didn't see the word Treehouse of Horrors anywhere.
Yeah, and just to cover our butts, it's never verbally mentioned. It's called the Treehouse of Horror.
But once we get into episode 1, the very first Treehouse of Horror, I could see why it was called that.
Hello, everyone. You know, Halloween is a very strange holiday. Personally, I don't understand it. Kids worshiping ghosts, pretending to be devils. Things on TV that are completely inappropriate for younger viewers. Nothing seems to bother my kids, but tonight's show, which I totally wash my hands of, is really scary. So if you have sensitive children, maybe you should tuck them into bed early tonight instead of writing us angry letters tomorrow. Thanks for your attention.
So the original Treehouse of Horror aired on October 25th, 1990, and it's the 3rd episode of the 2nd season. So like most other sitcoms, they started doing these holiday, Halloween-themed episodes in the 2nd season. We recently covered Roseanne, and same thing. Season 2 is where the Halloween special everyone knows aired. It was part of that season.
I think it makes sense, though, because you have to establish a world, and you have to establish characters, and you have to establish themes. So I think once you do that, then and you do it successfully, it gives you the green light to go ahead and start doing more ambitious things, like doing an entire Halloween-themed episode and keep it going for however many years the show has been on already.
Well, it seems to be working for The Simpsons because
absolutely
they're still doing this shit. So this episode opens with a warning from Marge Simpson. It's very much in the style of the original Frankenstein. She just kind of comes out and warns everyone like, hey, this is very scary. Put your children to bed. They shouldn't be watching this. Kind of gassing everyone up. It's great. I always loved that they added that. Yeah, it's awesome. And after that, they have an intro where the camera's kind of panning through a Springfield cemetery. And you see all kinds of like funny tombstones. I think one of them says like Elvis and Paul McCartney, I think.
Yeah, they're all pretty generic, but
yeah,
silly.
They add like little silly things in them, and it's just it's really cartoony. And then you have this big title card of The Simpsons Halloween special. So we cut to Bart, Lisa, and Maggie hanging out in their treehouse telling scary stories. I believe Lisa, you kind of catch the ending of her story, which I believe is like a take on When a Stranger Calls, where like the killer's in the house, or I think she says the killer's on the first floor or in the basement or something like that, she says. And Bart isn't impressed. He thinks all the stories she's telling are terrible.
Of course.
He's like falling asleep and cracking jokes.
What I thought was funny was I like how it starts to zoom in on the treehouse, but then it zooms out and it goes down to Homer, who was trick-or-treating. And it was just funny to me that the kids are in the treehouse and Homer was out trick-or-treating.
I know. The thing with Homer's like a big kid. That's always been how he's portrayed on the show. And that is really funny that he's like standing there dressed as a ghost. Yeah. And he's like really happy with all the candy he has. And again, throughout the entire series, Homer is like Marge's like 4th child, basically.
Yep.
So Homer's all excited. He's holding his bag of candy, and he notices that the kids are in the treehouse telling stories. So he decides to eavesdrop on them. So he climbs up, and in the middle of this, Bart starts to go into his first story, and the title of this segment is Bad Dream House.
By the way, I wrote down in my notes, I'm naming one of my albums.
Dude, the fact that no one's done that blows my mind, because that's amazing. It's an amazing title. So this segment is obviously inspired by Poltergeist and the Amityville Horror. Like, it's blatantly obvious that's what inspired this segment. And honestly, whenever I talk to people about like the Treehouse of Horrors, a lot of them mention this episode because it was the very first one. So I feel like a lot of people watched this growing up.
I would definitely have to agree with that.
So the Simpsons decide to buy this really old house for dirt cheap. And like Lisa, like always, she like quickly senses that there's like an evil presence. And Homer's kind of just brushing them all off. He's kind of like, shut up. We got this house for cheap. It's just an old house. I think at one point he sits on like a little like sofa or couch. and the house is like, get out. And he's like, oh, it's just the house settling. Like,
It's legit. Shit hits the fan the second the episode starts. Like, there's no foreshadowing. It's just bad shit right away.
And they kind of just, like, ignore it a bit. Like, Marge, like always, she's like the voice of reason. She, like, notices that something's off right away. Like, at one point, she walks into the kitchen and the walls are bleeding. And she's
just dripping blood.
Yeah, she's like, I think she said something about rusty pipes or something about, like, the house just being old. So even she's a little oblivious. Shit's flying all over the place. Things are, like, floating in the air. And there's even a scene where there's, like, a portal in the kitchen to another dimension. And Homer, he grabs an orange and just kind of throws it into the portal. And then the orange flies back at them. And there's like a note on it.
And it says, stop throwing things into our... I forgot exactly what they say, but it's like, please stop throwing things into our world or something like that.
It's like, stop throwing trash into our dimension or some shit like that.
Yeah, that's it.
So Homer doesn't give a shit. He's just kind of like, whatever. He's just having fun with the whole thing. So later that night, the house possesses the entire family, and each one of them start grabbing like all sorts of like sharp objects, axes and butcher knives, and I think even like Maggie has like a little like not a switchblade but like a pocket knife in her mouth when she's like crawling on the floor.
So I remember saying to myself as I'm watching this, like, this is really dark for like a family television cartoon. They all have like these brutal weapons. The house is telling them to kill. And prior to the scenes with the house telling them to kill, there's a scene where Bart is getting strangled by a lamp. And I'm like, this is like, kids are seeing this. It's really funny.
It is. And another thing we didn't mention yet was it has a great score.
It does.
Like the little creepy music that's playing is like awesome. And it really does, like, it's silly. It's The Simpsons. But like that music kind of does add a little creepy factor to it.
Oh, 100%.
So the entire family, they're basically in a circle. They all have their knives and axes pointed at each other. And during this scene, you're constantly cutting back to Marge, who is also grabbing a knife. At one point, I think Homer's like, where are you, Marge, or something like that. And Marge is like, I'm in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And then he notices the kids and goes after them. So we see Marge, she's raising the knife, lowers it, and all she's doing is making a sandwich. It's so dumb.
It's amazing.
It is. It's great. So she notices the family. She runs outside and she's like, what are you guys doing? This house is terrible. Look, you're going to all kill each other. And they're all like, oh, I'm sorry. They all drop like their weapons and walk away.
It's like nothing ever happened.
And she's like, kids, grab your jackets. We're getting out of here. And then I think in this little conversation, Lisa walks over to like the basement and notices that there's an Indian burial ground at the bottom of the steps. And I think this was really funny. This made me laugh. And I was just like, I don't know why I got a kick out of this, but like one of the tombstones says Crazy Horse. And then there's another tombstone next to it that says not so crazy horse.
Yeah. Yep.
Homer grabs like the phone and he's like, did you tell us that this house was built on like an Indian burial ground? He's just like, yeah. Then he hangs up and he tells Marge like, yeah, they mentioned it 4 or 5 times. So like Homer's he was just happy that they got this house for cheap.
You got to get that house for cheap, boy.
So at this point, Marge, she's had enough. She's fucking screaming. The house keeps kind of like telling them to get out. They're going to die. I think he says he's going to like fry their brains. Their intestines are going to explode. And she's like, shut up. Leave us alone. What is the point of all of this? It makes no sense. And Marge is just kind of like, she explains to her family. She's like, look, if we're going to live here, we have to just accept each other. Like she tells that to the family. She tells that to the house. And the house is obedient. It actually listens to Marge because she's the mom. You know what I mean? Like it's got to listen to her. So the house is like, can I have a minute alone? And they leave. The Simpsons leave. They all walk out. And the house, poltergeist style, implodes. Like it like sucks itself in and evaporates into itself. So it would rather die
Than be with the
than have to
Simpsons.
live with the Simpsons.
And Lisa says that too.
It's funny because Lisa, like in these early seasons, it's like she's always the smart one and always like there's a lot of foreshadowing with her, and she's always like has like these quotes and these little lines, you know? And it's like in these episodes specifically, it's almost like they didn't listen to Lisa at all.
Yeah. And dude, when the house sucks itself in and disappears and they're all just staring like at the nothing that's there, the purple sky, that whole setting is just really, really good. Like it's just so atmospheric, and it's I don't know. I really love like those exterior illustrations that they do, because it's just such a, I don't know, like they really have their own. They have their own life. You know what I mean?
It's crazy to associate the word atmospheric in The Simpsons, but this segment has a lot of atmosphere, which is so odd, but it does.
Greetings, Earthlings. I am Kang. Do not be frightened. We mean you no harm.
You speak English?
I am actually speaking Rigelian. By an astonishing coincidence, both of our languages are exactly the same.
Well, what are you gonna do with us, man?
Kodos and I are taking you to Rigel 4, a world of infinite delights to tantalize your senses and challenge your intellectual limitations.
Look, I know that to you, we Simpsons are a lower order of life. We face that prejudice every day of our lives. But we are happy on our little planet. We throw ourselves on your mercy. Please return us to...
Dinner time. Hey, get a load of that spread.
So in the second segment, Hungry Are the Damned, the Simpsons are just kind of hanging out in their backyard having a barbecue. Like, at one point, Homer puts way too much like gas or something in the grill, and it blows up. They're like killing flies and shit. It's pretty mundane. Like they're just kind of hanging out.
Yeah.
And then randomly, an alien abducts them and like kind of sucks them up into the ship with those like beam of lights. I forget what you would call them. Kind of just lifting them into the ship.
Right.
And they have trouble lifting Homer because he's too fat. So they have to use two beams while he's munching on a burger. And once they're inside the ship, they're introduced to these three aliens: Kang, Kodos, and Serac. I'm probably butchering his name. His name is Serac the Preparer.
Well, to be fair, he'd have to remove your tongue for you to properly pronounce the name.
Exactly. And I guess that's why, because I can't fucking say his name. So
There you go.
That's why. And Kang and Kodos are like two of the most popular like alien. Like there's I think this might be the first time you're ever introduced to them, if I remember correctly. I might be wrong, but I have a feeling this was the first time you ever met these aliens or had an episode themed around them. If I remember correctly.
I don't know why, but for whatever reason, the aliens remind me of the principal from the school that's in The Simpsons. I don't know. It sounds stupid, but I don't know why, but they just do.
I think it might be the same actor that voices them. That's why, or voices one of them. I think
That's
why.
possible.
Remember, dude, on The Simpsons, it's like the same 7 people voice like almost all. Like each actor voices like 2 or 3 characters. So
You know, tangent alert. Didn't the girl that's in Return of the Living Dead 2, the girl with the red hair, isn't she the voice actor of Bart Simpson?
I don't remember.
I could be very wrong about this, so please do not quote me on this, but I could have sworn she was the voice actor for Bart Simpson.
Maybe. I'll be honest. I'm not as familiar with Return of the Living Dead 2 as I am the first one. Like the first one I know like the back of my hand. Part 2 I don't watch as much.
Dude, I love Part 2. A lot of people give it shit. I fucking love that movie. Like, it's you know what? I will say that Return of the Living Dead 2 is like Chud 2, where it's an entirely kind of different movie, even though the premise is kind of exactly the same in Return of the Living Dead 2. But I just love how it's silly. It doesn't take itself seriously. And again, it's one of those movies that's got huge atmosphere. It's a lot of fun to watch. Dana Ashbrook's in it. Shout out to Twin Peaks. And I don't know. But again, I know I went off on a tangent, as we usually do. But I think, and she's also in Night of the Creeps. She's the girl. She's the girl in the scene when Tom Atkins comes in and she's like, "Who are you?" So I think she might do that. I'll tell you what. We'll do a little fact check and we will let you know at the end of the episode.
So there's one thing I can confirm when it comes to the actress that voices Bart. She was in the Twilight Zone movie.
Okay.
She was in that for a fact. She was in the segment with the, which is funny because we're going to be touching on another Simpsons segment that's based on a Twilight Zone episode that's the inspiration for what I'm talking about. She's in the episode with the little boy with the powers. Yeah. She's like the sister, the blonde sister that gets put into the TV. And like this...
Do you think that's coincidence?
Maybe. I know for a fact that's the actress that voices Bart. So, I know that. For that, I know. The other two movies, I'm not sure, but we'll fact check that one.
Answer coming at the end of the episode.
So, the aliens start treating the Simpsons great, almost like royalty. They're preparing them all these foods, these like Homer has a steak and Marge has some dish that's really hard to make and she's impressed by that. And they keep telling them that they're going to take them to the great feast at Rigel 4. So there's like this big feast back on their planet that they're taking the Simpsons to. There's this one really funny moment that made me laugh where like, I forget if it's Kang or Kodos, it's one of the two aliens. And they walk the family over to a TV. And he's like, this is like a cable with like a million channels. It has anything your heart desires. And Bart goes, does it have HBO? And he's like, no, that would cost extra. Yeah. So I love how even like 30 years ago, over 30 years ago at this point, like HBO is still expensive. It still costs extra. It still costs extra to have. Even now, you want to get that streaming, that HBO Max, it's going to run you $15 a month extra. So I just got a kick out of that. I just got a kick out of that joke. It's fucking amazing. So throughout the entire segment, the aliens, they constantly like make reference to how delicious and plump the Simpsons look. They even go as far as like they weigh them at one point. And Lisa eventually she gets suspicious. And she's kind of like, something's not right. So she sneaks into the kitchen. And in the kitchen, we see Serac, the preparer. He's making something. And he has this line. He says, it gives the human the perfect flavor. It gives the humans the perfect flavor. So Lisa, she's like, what the fuck is he talking about? So she runs in and she grabs a cookbook. And on the cookbook, it says, how to cook humans. So she rushes out. And she rushes to her family and she's like, these guys want to eat us. and now comes the silliest moment of the episode. Well, the silliest moment of this segment. The whole episode is fucking silly. In this segment is Korg or Kodos is like...
Listen, I just want to say, I'm impressed that you could still name these aliens because you said their names a few times and I already forgot all of them. So props to you for remembering their names.
So at this point, there's this really funny moment where like Lisa misses a part like on the title of the book because there's some space dust on it. Kang blows on the book and he shows her. It says, how to cook for humans. And then Lisa's like, no, there's some more space dust. She blows on it and it says, how to cook for 40 humans. And then Kang is like, no, there's a little bit more dust on here. And he blows on it, and it says how to cook for 40 humans. Like, this joke goes on. I thought it was going to go on even longer. So the aliens are disappointed, and they take them back to Earth, and they're like, you know what? You guys are going to just live normal lives and not be worshipped like gods. And Lisa has this, like, she has another moment where she kind of, like, says, like, we were the monsters on that ship, not them. Just like in the last segment with the Bad Dream House. So it's just funny how they always give Lisa these lines. I don't know why. It's amazing.
And they're all mad at her. At the end of the episode, they're all mad at Lisa. They're like, we always told you you're too good for you're too smart for your own good.
No, that crispy shorn and shaven, thou.
I said.
But sure, no craven, ghastly, grim, and ancient raven wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me, Tell me what thy lordly name is on the nice plutonian shore.
Quoth the raven.
Eat my shorts.
Bart, stop it. He says nevermore, and that's all he'll ever say.
Okay.
So the third and final segment in this episode is the Raven. So we cut back to the treehouse. Lisa is finally getting a chance to kind of tell her story because the last two were told by Bart. And she chooses the classic Edgar Allan Poe tale, The Raven.
I would just like to add, the decor in the treehouse, as simple as it is really great. It's just a bat, a skeleton, and a pumpkin, and I'm sorry, a jack-o'-lantern. And it's just so good. And I like how the entrance to the treehouse is like a cut out piece of the wood. Like, it's not even like it's like a...
Yeah.
Like a rectangle. It's like a jagged piece just ripped out of the wall.
It is really good. I noticed that too. That there's like you see the little jack-o'-lantern. I think right behind like Bart or something like that, and it adds to their like little scary story setup that they have going on. So this segment is basically a parody version of the story, but they have Homer as the narrator, which is actually voiced by James Earl Jones. You noticed that right away, right?
Mm-hmm. I was trying to figure that out. You know what? I was trying to figure that out. I was like, who's narrating this? And then once you just said that, I'm like, yep, that's it. That's the name I couldn't put my tongue on.
Yep. Fucking Darth Vader was the voice of the narrator in this segment. And Bart's the Raven. Obviously, he's got to be the nuisance,
the jerk
of the whole segment, the whole story. It's cool too because they were able to fit all of them. So like Marge is Lenore, the painting of Lenore.
Dude, I love that her hair is continued on another painting.
Yeah,
that was my favorite part of that episode. Was that there was a second painting of the one little piece of her hair.
But it follows a lot of the same beats as the original story if you're familiar with it. You know, the narrator, he's reading a book to kind of distract himself from his lost love, Lenore. And a raven starts to tap. He starts hearing a tapping at his chamber door. And there's a lot of back and forth. He eventually lets the raven in through a window. And the raven starts to kind of like just drive him insane. So in the original story, the raven says, nevermore. But while Lisa's telling her story, Bart is kind of annoyed because he thinks it's boring, so he continuously like just interrupts it. He just continues to interrupt Lisa, and it's great. So at one point there's the buildup where the raven is about to say nevermore, but the raven says, eat my shorts, which is obviously a very famous quote said by Bart Simpson.
His claim to fame.
So she's running through the story, and you know the narrator's fighting the bird. He wants to choke the bird out like Homer would choke out Bart. So you know they're playing up a lot of those those stereotypical things you'd associate the Simpsons with. And you know the story ends like normal. I think the raven throws a bunch of books at Homer as the narrator, and he's eventually just kind of laid out and passes out with all these books around him. And then we cut back to Lisa, and he's kind of like, Bart's like not impressed by the story. He's like, that's not a scary story. And I think Lisa says that, back in the 1800s, I guess people found this scary. Bart's just basically being a dick, like always.
So one thing I thought was really funny is when they're coming out of the treehouse and going down the ladder, I like how Maggie's hanging on the back of Bart. Like she's got her arms wrapped around his neck on his back. It is just really funny that that's how they chose to have Maggie come down the ladder on Bart.
So everyone goes to bed except for Homer, because the kids leave the treehouse and Homer's kind of just sitting there shivering in fright, which is hilarious because he actually found these like kid stories to be terrifying. And they're laying in bed, and Marge is like, I'm not sleeping with the light on, Homer. And she's kind of trying to comfort him. She's like, Homer, they're just kid stories. They're make-believe. Like, don't worry about them. And I love this because he's laying in bed. It's dark. Now, I didn't mention this earlier, but when Homer arrived to the treehouse, when he was holding his candy, he says, I love Halloween, because he's talking about the candy and he's eating all the candy and stuff. And it ends with Homer in bed, and he says, "I hate Halloween." So it's just really smart how they were able to kind of, bring it full circle at the end of this episode.
Hello, everyone. Before last year's Halloween show, I warned you not to let your children watch, but you did anyway. Well, this year's episode is even worse. It's scarier, more violent, and I think they snuck in some bad language, too. So please, tuck in your children and... Well, if you didn't listen to me last time, you're not going to now. Enjoy the show.
So Treehouse of Horror 2 aired on October 31st, 1991. So on Halloween. That's pretty awesome. And it was part of Season 3, Episode 6. So just like the previous season, Marge comes out once again, like the original Frankenstein, and warns everyone again that this episode is even scarier than the previous episode. I love how this was like just like they kept like this cold open going just to kind of warn people. And going back to this, because I didn't say it in the previous episode, it really does make you think like, damn, maybe I should have listened to Marge. Like, is this going to be some dark shit I'm about to watch?
I love it.
So after another, wide shot and panning into through another cemetery, they kind of cut and paste the same kind of idea. They changed up the tombstones to other little funny sayings and stuff like that. We cut to the Simpsons house. And there's this one little thing I loved, and I don't know if you noticed it, but when we get to that wide shot of the Simpsons house, you see the Peanuts from the Great Pumpkin run by in their costumes. Did you catch that?
You know what? I didn't catch that.
Dude, it's so great. I didn't remember that little like Easter egg, but like they're running in like a little group like they did in the Great Pumpkin. You know how they're all like huddled together running by? Like it's literally that. I thought that was awesome.
I like that there was hippies sitting in front of Jim Morrison's grave, and I like that one of the graves said R.I.P. Cajun cooking.
Yeah, it's so dumb. They just do like all the they just add a bunch of funny
just random shit.
Yeah, I even think this is like I don't think it was the first episode, but this is like the first time they took some of the cast and crew and they made their names all spooky sounding.
Yeah, they did.
Like it was like R.I.P. Frank and stuff like that. I think it's that because that's like a thing now with the Treehouse of Horror episodes, and I believe this was the first time they did it was with this second episode. So inside the house, we cut to Homer. He's sitting on the sofa and he's eating candy like a pig. Some trick-or-treaters come to the door. It's the bullies, I believe, and they kind of threaten him like, "Give us candy or we'll throw eggs at your door," or something like that. And he's like, "Aren't you guys too old to be trick-or-treating?" And they're like, "Give it to us." They threaten him. He gives them the candy. They egg his house anyway. So Marge, Bart, and Lisa, they come back from trick-or-treating, and Bart is dressed up as an executioner.
When I was watching it, it just reminded me of the song by Power Trip, the Executioner's Tax. So we just want to... It's amazing. That whole album is amazing. And we just want to say rest in peace to Riley Gale. Louie and I both listen to a lot of hardcore metal, thrash, crossover, whatever it is. It's a huge loss. And, it just reminded me of that. And we just wanted to give our condolences and a shout out to Riley and Power Trip and for their friends and family.
So Marge warns everybody, basically, because like Homer and fucking Lisa and Bart are like scarfing down all this candy, and she tells them only have one piece because if you have more than that, you're gonna have nightmares, which is the first time I've ever heard of that before.
We can add that to our Halloween myths.
Exactly. I've never heard that if you eat more than one piece of candy on Halloween, you'll have nightmares.
When they're all eating candy, I don't know if you noticed, so like they're all eating, like you could see them picking out one piece of candy, but when Homer's eating his candy, it looks like he's eating like gruel. Like it looks like it's like ground beef or something that he's just shoving in his mouth like a fucking pig. It's hilarious.
Once again, Homer is Marge's fourth child. He's like on his hands and knees eating the candy like the kids when she tells them about the whole nightmare thing. So they ignore Marge and they eat a shit ton of candy. I think at one point they cut to like Lisa laying in bed because the first segment is her dream, her nightmare. And she's in the bed with a ton of candy wrappers around her. She's eating them. She feels a little like sick, you can kind of tell. And she goes over to her side and falls asleep. So then we transition into the monkey's paw, which is the first segment.
Yeah, what is this thing?
It is a monkey's paw dating back to Alal bin Abdallah. It has the power to grant wishes to its owner.
Oh, yeah? How much?
Sir, I must strongly advise you do not purchase this. Behind every wish lurks grave misfortune. I myself was once president of Algeria.
Come on, pal, I don't want to hear your life story. Paw me!
So the Simpsons are on a trip randomly to Morocco, and Homer decides to buy a monkey's paw from a peddler. And the peddler kind of warns Homer. He tells him look, this monkey's paw will grant you 3 wishes, but with great misfortune. And obviously Homer fucking brushes the dude off. He's like, whatever. And he just walks back over to his family. And there's just one really great moment where Marge is like, where did you buy that ugly thing? And Homer points to this ominous empty spot where there's this little breeze. It's empty now where the peddler was.
It's like a little wind tunnel.
Yeah, and then he realizes that he just pointed to the wrong area, and he moves his finger, and he's like, "Oh, there he is." That shit's amazing.
Yo, the merchant looks like Egg Shen from Big Trouble in Little China.
Yes, that's exact. He has one big eyeball and one tiny.
They had to have modeled that design of that character after him. They had to.
It's great. It's fucking great. So side note, because before they go home, there's this little throwaway joke that I thought was really funny. Before they get on the plane, Homer gets caught smuggling souvenirs, and all these security guards and shit point their guns at him, and he's like, I didn't do anything, and they raise up his shirt and it's all taped to his body, and the one guard is like, you have to pay a fine of $2. And Homer's like, okay. It's such a fucked up joke.
One of the souvenirs he had was a bumper sticker that was taped to his stomach that said, honk if you're Moroccan. I just thought it was funny that he was trying to smuggle that back on the plane.
He has a mug too, right? Or some shit taped to him.
It's a mug. There's a little camel doll, and then there's a pack of cigarettes.
I just love how there's that random just throwaway joke in the middle of this. He gets the monkey's paw, and they had to add in this little stealing souvenir thing in the middle. I just thought it was great. I had to mention it. So once home, Lisa warns them to not make any wishes. I think Homer's holding on to the monkey paw. And while this happens, I forget how, but Maggie grabs the paw and closes her eyes. And out of nowhere, this fancy limousine pulls up, and Homer looks at it. He's like, "Oh, Maggie, you wished for a nice car, a limousine for us." And then this dude comes out with a shiny new pacifier and knocks on the door. And they're like, "Oh, she just wanted a new pacifier." It's so dumb. That's what I love about The Simpsons, dude. The jokes are so silly, but they're great. So after that, Bart grabs the monkey's paw. They're all excited now because they see that Maggie's wish came true. Bart grabs the monkey's paw and he's like, I wish for us to be rich and famous. But this wish backfires. And the entire town kind of hates them because now they're on every billboard. They're even on mammogram test. Yep. And
they have
a woman,
CDs.
she's
they have music.
Yeah, they have CDs, music, yeah. With the mammogram test, there's a woman, one of the characters is they've gone too far. It's so... Dude,
the restaurant that they go in is called the Gilded Truffle, and I'm like, what the hell does that even mean? I need to look that up, but that is just a really funny name to me, the Gilded Truffle.
So Lisa is like, okay, we have to change this. So it's her turn to make a wish, and she wishes for world peace. And this causes everyone to be super happy. Nations are joining together. People are getting rid of their weapons and burning their guns and knives and shit.
Dude, the best part is how it's a line of different soldiers from different countries and different kinds of people and different jobs. And then there's Krusty, and Krusty has the most weapons out of everyone. Yeah. He's got brass knuckles, knives, guns. This is amazing.
He's like, I won't need these anymore. And he burns, yeah.
And they're just tossing him into this giant pit of fire. It's amazing.
So the whole world is now peaceful and happy. And guess who shows up? Kang and Kodos again. And they're deciding that this is the time to conquer the earth and make all of the humans slaves. So they land on the planet and they come out holding a club and a slingshot.
Yo, I had that in my notes. Aliens with a club and slingshot with a crying emoji face.
So eventually Marge, she's like begging Homer, like the entire world's going to shit. We're slaves. I think like everything is terrible. And she tells Homer, they're just kind of going back and forth. And Homer's like, look, I'm going to make a wish. And what does he wish for? A turkey sandwich. Yeah. And he's like, oh, this seems like a perfectly normal turkey sandwich. And what happens? Nope. It's a dry turkey sandwich. And he's so disappointed.
Sandwich looked good, though. I'll give him that.
So Homer, like, basically everyone's come to terms. They're like, look, this monkey's paw is evil. Let's get rid of it. Homer goes outside, and as he's about to throw it away, he sees Flanders. And Flanders has this, like, you know, he's like, howdy do, neighbor. He says, howdy do, like, slave or something like that. Or, okily dokily, fellow slave. I think he says that. And Homer's like, oh, he's like, you know, he asked Homer, he's like, oh, is that one of those, like, wish-granting, like, monkey paws? And Homer's like, yeah, do you want it? Because, you know, he hates Flanders. So he hands the monkey's paw to Flanders, and Flanders like, what should be my first wish? And he says to have the aliens go away or go back to their planet. Now in this shot, you see the aliens chasing Moe, and Moe's like, get away from me. And then as soon as Flanders makes this wish, Moe's chasing the aliens with a board and a single nail. Dude, that joke, I don't know why, I love how that's what scares them. And the aliens they make you know that it's one of the most dangerous weapons. They're like, they were able to defeat us with a board and single nail.
But you know what's scary? What they say is that and it's actually like a ton of relevance to now, was that the aliens are like, you know, they're gonna create a bigger board with a bigger nail in it, and it's gonna destroy them all. And I'm like, wow, ain't that the truth?
So the episode ends again. Flanders is looked at as a hero, and he turns his house into a castle. And Homer just watches because he's upset because the monkey paw had a negative effect on his family, but Flanders is living like a king now.
Moe's Tavern. Hold on, I'll check. Hey, everybody. I'm a stupid moron with an ugly face and a big butt, and my butt smells, and I like to kiss my own butt.
That's a new one.
Wait a minute.
So we cut back to the wraparound segment with Lisa asking Bart if she can sleep with him in the bed, and he kind of is like, sure, just one candy bracelet, because again...
No, Lisa offers him a candy necklace. So when Bart eats it, like, he eats it in like a second, and then he hands her the string back. Like, I was thinking, like, holy shit. Like, I remember, like, when we used to have the candy necklaces, we would eat them, and they were not easy to eat, because the shit got stuck in your teeth, the fucking rope that the candy was on got stuck on your teeth, and there was always like a little piece of the candy on there. There was always saliva on the fucking rope. It was disgusting. Candy bracelets and candy necklaces were great, were also horrible.
I'll never say I was a big fan of them. So she hops in bed and she goes to sleep, and Bart rolls over, and this is how we transition into his nightmare, his segment, and that is the Bart Zone. So this episode is basically a parody of the Twilight Zone episode, It's a Good Life. Bart has the ability to use his mind to bend reality, and he can transform people into like these like real weird creatures or whatever. It's very reminiscent of the Twilight Zone episode. If you know the Twilight Zone episode, you know exactly where this is going. So this causes the town of Springfield to kind of constantly be in fear of Bart. They're always smiling. They're always kind of like cheerful, but it's all fake. You know what I mean? At one point, Lisa and Homer are like at home, smiling, watching TV. I think they're watching a football game. And Bart shows up and he's like, I want to watch Krusty. And out of frustration, while they're watching the football game, I think one of the players is like kicking a field goal. Homer is turned into the ball and he's in the TV and he hits like the
He hits the goalpost.
he hits that and he comes back home and he's got like bandages on his head and he's frustrated and he's telling himself like he's gonna keep it cool because again Bart has all these powers but he can't control himself and he wants to bash Bart over the head with a chair. And in that moment Bart transforms him into a jack-in-the-box with like just by pointing at him. Very similar to the It's a Good Life episode.
When Bart is watching Krusty and Krusty's like, I can't do it anymore, and he's on TV, and then he catches himself and he's like, let me see if I can get any Sideshow Bob's legal over-the-counter wake-up drugs. And I'm like, wow. I was like, this is a cartoon in 1991, and they're making a reference about drugs like that. I was like, that's amazing.
So Marge takes Homer, who's still a jack-in-the-box, and Bart to go see Dr. Marvin Monroe. And he kind of recommends that like they do more father and son stuff. So like they go to like baseball games and an amusement park. It's all kind of told through like a montage of them having a good time. And just how difficult it is for Homer because he's a jack-in-the-box. Like there's this one part where like they go up on a roller coaster and down on a roller coaster. And the cart goes down, but since his head is on a spring, so it's still further up. So Bart eventually kind of changes his ways, and he's like, oh, you're my dad, I love you. And Homer's like, hey, can you turn me back into like my normal form? And Bart's like, sure. And he transforms Homer back into his normal form, and the two of them kind of like embrace, and Homer kisses Bart on the cheek like in a loving fatherly way, and that causes Bart to wake up from his nightmare. Like that's his nightmare, the fact that
his nightmare, he loved his dad.
That his dad loved him. And now both of them are scared because of this. So they both have had their nightmares, they're fucking freaking out, and they go to their parents' room and they ask Marge and Homer like, hey, is it okay if we sleep in the bed with you guys? You know, we had a nightmare so and so. So Homer's like, yeah, get in the bed. It's all right. He explains to them that he has to be at work in 2 hours. And that's how we transition into his dream, his nightmare. And that's the segment, If I Only Had a Brain.
It wasn't supposed to be this way. It was supposed to be a thing of beauty, not this abomination.
Oh, Smithers, I was wrong to play God. Life is precious, not a thing to be toyed with. Now take out that brain and flush it down the toilet.
So, in Homer's dream, he's fired by Mr. Burns because he's caught sleeping on the job at the power plant. And like I think Smithers tells Mr. Burns, like, it's time to make an example. Let's do a random firing. So they're looking at like across all the security cameras, and like Homer's like passed out with like donuts and shit in his office in like his little cubicle.
There's one, so when they're panning, so when they pan to Homer, they pan to the guys that, you know, drinking coffee and eating donuts. Then he pans over to guys in like a shower messing around, and he calls them slug-a-beds. And I was like, I've never heard that term before, but there is a producer named Slug-a-Bed who's like electronic.
That's a deep cut Simpsons reference that they chose to use as a name.
Yeah, it's like very beat oriented, like electronic, kind of trappy, like beats. And her name, I'm pretty sure it's a he, is Slug-a-Bed. So I'm like, that's got to be where he got his name from, because I mean, I've never heard that term, only from knowing the producer, but actually hearing it outside of that is on The Simpsons just now. So I have a feeling that's where they got the name for that.
That's actually pretty cool.
Listen, when I started producing under Without You, I'm Hunting Them, which I don't go under anymore. I mean, it's still active, but I go under my name, D. Catalano. When you know, like, if people, like, I've had people tell me, like, ask me what is your name from? And I don't tell them. I've maybe told 2 people where my name is from. And then someone figured it out where it was from, and they were like, what is wrong with you? And I'm like, that is the reason why my name is that name, is because you just asked me what is wrong with me, because you did the fucking footwork to find out what the hell it was from. So stuff like that always gets me, and I think it's amazing.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's cool. It's cool when people do stuff like that. So it's revealed that Mr. Burns and Smithers are creating a robot, and they want it to be kind of like the perfect worker, but it's missing a brain. And the robot basically looks like Homer when you see it. So back at the Simpsons home, Bart and Lisa are kind of like looking through newspapers. You know, Homer's bummed because he's unemployed. And Bart notices in the paper that there's this good job paying, you know, pretty decent money, but it's at night. And Homer's like, oh, that sounds like a really great job. What is it? And Bart goes, it's a grave digger. And he like snickers all evilly.
Let's rewind. Bart goes, oh, here's a job. He's like $28 an hour, outdoors, and you get to be around interesting people. And Homer's like, this is great. And then he goes, what is it? And he's like, it's a grave digger. And he just starts laughing maniacally. It's hilarious.
So on Homer's first night of the job, he falls asleep in the open grave, and Mr. Burns and Smithers, they come across him and they think he's a corpse for some reason. They don't realize it's Homer, their own employee. But Mr. Burns, I'm sure Mr. Burns could care less about Homer at this point, so that makes sense. So they drag his body.
He doesn't even realize it is Homer.
Yeah, they just think he's a dead body.
Yeah.
So they drag his body back to the lab. They put him in like a bag. I think there's like this funny joke where like Mr. Burns is like whacking him with like a shovel because Smithers is like, oh, he's still alive. And he just keeps whacking him. And back at the lab, they remove Homer's brain and put it into the robot. Once the robot comes to life, it basically starts to act like lazy, just like Homer, like lazy, falling asleep. It's not productive at all. So karma basically bit Mr. Burns in the ass.
The robot goes right for the donuts.
It does. It's Homer. They basically made a robot Homer. Mr. Burns is all disappointed, and Smithers basically like, you know, there's nothing we could do about it. So Mr. Burns is like, just remove the brain and destroy it. And Smithers is like, I think his family would want him back. So Mr. Burns is like, all right, fine, just whatever, do whatever, just get rid of the shit. I don't want to deal with it anymore. And in the process, after removing the brain and putting it back into Homer, the robot is all like statuesque. It's all like not functional, and it falls on top of Mr. Burns, crushing him, except for his head.
So it's funny because Smithers, when they're putting the brain back in Homer, he goes, this man's very much alive. and Mr. Burns goes, oh, you're right. I guess I owe you a Coke. And I was like, what a random, silly, random, dumb, but to me, very entertaining line to just throw in there.
Yeah, it is. That's what I love about The Simpsons. It's just these little jokes that are so random, but they make you chuckle. And some of them don't even make sense when you think about it. So, since they're in a lab, they get the bright idea to remove Mr. Burns' head and sew it onto Homer's body. So Homer now has 2 heads. So, at that moment, Homer wakes up from his nightmare, and we're back in the wraparound segment of the show. And he looks over, and it wasn't a dream. Mr. Burns' head is actually sewn onto his shoulder. And I forget what Mr. Burns says, but he like looks over, and it's like Mr. Burns just there looking at him in the bed. And there's also like this like really silly like moment, and they pretend like the rest of the show is gonna be Mr. Burns permanently on Homer's body.
I wish they would do like an episode where I don't know if there is one, because maybe there is, but it would be really funny if they actually followed up and did a whole episode with that.
Like the Lost episode where Mr. Burns is attached to
amazing.
Homer. It would be. That'd be hilarious.
This Halloween,
Get a good haul this year?
Jackpot!
something strange is happening to The Simpsons.
Every day, same old cat. I'll make it more interesting.
Is Bart turning into a monster with sinister powers?
Catch up from your side of the family. No monsters on my side.
Are aliens invading Springfield?
We can resolve our differences peacefully. Ow.
And what's happening to Homer? Is it trick or treat?
The Simpsons, Thursday at 8 on Fox 5.
So, Lou, we ran through the first 2 episodes of The Simpsons Treehouse of Horrors. Which segment out of both episodes was your favorite?
So it's a tough one because honestly, I like all the segments. I like both episodes. I'm not I can't choose one over the other. But if I had to choose one segment, one that I feel like I could rewatch a couple times, which I did for the podcast, it would have to be Hungry Are the Damned. I just like the concept of the Simpsons as a family going up into an alien spaceship and thinking that these aliens want to eat them. It's absurd. And what's funny is it's not very Halloween-y if you think about it. It's more like science fiction. But just the whole setting, and I've always loved the Kang and Koda. Like, I've always loved the alien characters. I thought they were like just the slobber coming out of their mouth permanently, and just the way they talk, and like how like they're supposed to be these like smart, intelligent beings, and they're not. Like, they're kind of dumb.
Yeah.
And like even the Simpsons like take them as a more threatening, like, you know, more threatening than they actually are. So if I had to choose one, it would have to be that segment. I don't know. It just I find the jokes funny. Like, that HBO joke is great, and just the whole concept is just so outlandish that I just had a lot of fun watching it. If you had to pick one, Dave, what would it be?
So if I was to choose a segment, it would likely be Bad Dream House. But out of both episodes, what I liked even more was the wraparound, especially the wraparound in the first Treehouse of Horror. So I like that they decided to use the end of Halloween as the wraparound, and how Homer was coming back from trick-or-treating and the kids were telling each other scary stories inside the treehouse. I just really, really love that.
It is interesting how they chose the end of Halloween to kind of focus like on these wraparounds. Like, they chose in the first one, the treehouse, the kids are kind of just telling stories and Homer's showing up from trick-or-treating. And in the second one, the kids are coming home with Marge and Homer's just kind of home giving candy out to trick-or-treaters. Like, you don't see too many Halloween specials that focus on the end of Halloween.
Yeah,
you know,
and again, both they for the first two they chose to do it on the end of Halloween, and I just really love that. And yeah, so I'm gonna go with the wraparounds.
And it's interesting because they could have easily like continued on with the treehouse gimmick. You know what I mean? Like, the whole like, okay, the kids are in the treehouse, they're telling stories, and continue that on every like season, you know, for these episodes. And they don't.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting how these specific episodes are known as the Treehouse of Horror episodes. And so far, only this first one has a treehouse in it. The second one doesn't. But they're known as that. And honestly, I don't recall every single... There's been a lot of Treehouse of Horror episodes. If they go back to it, I think they do. But it's such a cool just concept. And if you're not a fan of The Simpsons, at least watch these episodes. More than likely, if you're listening to us, realistically, you probably do enjoy The Simpsons. Right, Dave? You agree with me, right? Like
the Simpsons Treehouse of Horror is something that you can definitely add to your list that is, again, just synonymous with Halloween. I think there's many things that you can say, that you can think in your head that go with Halloween. And I think once you say Treehouse of Horror, that's just one of the things that you can automatically be like, oh, Halloween. So again, it should be on your list to check out. They're fun. They're mindless. And it's just Halloween.
Has Bart joined the living dead?
We have to kill the boy!
How'd you know he's a vampire?
Vampire? Ah!
The Simpsons Scare-a-thon continues next.
So, we did a little digging around. The actress Suzanne Snyder, who I was referring to from Return of the Living Dead 2, who was also in Killer Clowns from Outer Space, and was also in Night of the Creeps, did not voice act Bart Simpson. Louis, who did?
Nancy Cartwright. See, that's who voices Bart. And she was in the Twilight Zone movie.
So, I apologize for that tangent. I was wrong. But you all should go watch Return of the Living Dead Part 2 because I love that movie.
So with that being said, be sure to subscribe. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Haunted Hangover.
And if you can rate and review us, that would be greatly appreciated.
And remember, the best cure for a hangover is...
more booze.
Later, guys.